How to make change in a bureaucracy. So a little bit about what informs my experience. So I'm an attorney by background. Some themes you'll see throughout this presentation are, words matter, how you say things matter, how you write policy matters. Also at the start of this, you start from the perspective of, and I love defense industry, I love researchers, I love data scientists, everyone in here who fits one of those roles, thank you so much for doing what you do, because it enables me to do what I do, because I'm not really a SME of anything, but I can take that information and I can get after problems pretty effectively using this formula that really was coined initially by retired General O'Brien, Mary O'Brien, who's now retired from the Air Force, but it was used exclusively by the Department of the Air Force's Women's Initiatives team for the last several years, shared with our service component WITs as well, although we all no longer exist officially. The policies are still there. The changes we all made are still there, so I'll start with that positive note. But that's what informs where we start. To industry, I thank you for making the point, like the requirements point. Here's the thing, how you get to a requirement, right? No entity in the DoD will do something just because it's the right thing to do. That sounds very depressing thing to say, but it is the truth. They get their requirements from the regulations that are written from within the agency, and then usually those regulations are a result of what the Hill has told the agency to do. We have some very persuasive authorities, different committees, you've heard Dakowitz mention, things like that, that help us push these things, but generally speaking, start from the point of, unfortunately, the Department of Defense is not going to do anything it's not been told to do. That generates our requirements, which is why, I don't know if Jen's still in the room, Whitestone, the policy she talked about where we changed it in the Air Force to where now we have to acquisition and develop capability to 95% of the recruiting population, that took us 4 years, 2 sentences. 2 sentences in a policy took 4 years to change. And I say that at the beginning of this presentation too, that this work is long, it's not immediate, and it takes a lot of grit. Someone earlier yesterday mentioned that book about grit, and that really is the truth. But if you have all those things and you stay after it, you 100% can make change in a bureaucracy, and you can break what I call break the bureaucracy. Uh-oh. Or break technology. Yeah, please, thank you. All right, so it is a 7-8-step process. This is some inspiration. I'm a big fan of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Like I said, I'm an attorney by background. I'm super inspired by her, but this is important, especially in our ever-changing environment where you have to fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that leads others to join you, because you can't do this alone. And at the end, I'm going to have some tidbits of why that's important and why you got to kind of build your team and be surrounded by people. And I've been very blessed by many people in this room that are part of my team. On the hard days, I can turn to them or turn to them to help me do things. Next slide. Why it matters. So these are some examples. They're very Air Force-centric because that's my experience, although I've done some stuff on the DoD and the joint level. Right? Maternity flight suits. Women have babies. It's how we're made if you choose to go down that path in your life. Aircraft, size to your body. This is impacting our real-world warfighters. And I know I don't have to really emphasize that too much to this crowd. You guys get that. But these are the people that have raised their hand to support and defend our nation and to put their lives on the line, so they deserve it. That's why this matters. Next slide. Okay, thanks. All right. 8-step process, and we call it the 5R framework. The 5R framework, this was coined by, like I said, General Mary O'Brien, and this is how we advocate these changes. You can do this at any level. I've primarily done it at the departmental level in the Air Force and the department level in the DoD. You can do it in your 06 command. You can do it, if you work for a 3-star. This works at every level, and I would even venture to say that it would probably work if you're in a big corporation and you're at the very, very bottom level and you're looking at changing something internal to your agency. You can use this same type of a framework. Readiness. we heard that mentioned earlier, combat effectiveness, lethality, all of those types of words. Retention, recruitment, resources, and risk. Risk is risk to force, risk to mission. What is the risk if we don't do this to the force? What is the risk to the mission if we don't do it? What is the benefit, are we going to be successful? Step one, so what is the problem? You have to identify the problem. This is generally pretty easy, right? And I'll start from my own work that I've done and people have done. So, right, for me, I had a baby. I was going TDY. I'm a JAG, so I traveled quite a bit representing clients throughout the world. And I realized that when I was TDY, I chose to breastfeed my children, that the department provided me a place to pump. It provided me, through TRICARE, a breast pump and all the supplies. But as I was traveling, how in the world was I supposed to get all this breast milk back home? No one told me the answer to that problem. And oh, by the way, as I did my research, I found out it's super expensive to ship breast milk from around the world. Very, very expensive. So I was in a position of either paying out of pocket for that, or just not doing it, pumping and dumping, which medical data, thanks to a lot of research done in that, shows that that can negatively impact your postpartum mental state for women who have had to do that. So that was the problem I identified. Identifying the problem, and then I had to figure out, is there a policy out there? Like, am I just missing something? For me, in this scenario, there was no policy. Like, it was just silent. No one, I guess, had ever thought, since women have, been serving unofficially since the Revolutionary War, and officially since 1948, I guess no one had thought that this was a thing that would be needed. So these are the questions that you can ask yourself. You have to dig into the policy. You have to figure out, is there a policy? Is it silent? Do we need to tweak it? Is the language is the language outdated? Is it just not helpful? Is it not clear? All those things are how you, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, are the things that you look through to determine, what is your problem. So you start there. Very simple. Here's some other examples on this side that we've done. You see anthropometric data is up there. Like I said, we worked with Jen and her team to do that and identify that problem. Okay, why is it important? To many of us in this room, this question probably will get under your skin and agitate you the most, because you're like, this is a no-brainer. We know why this is important. As all the ladies up here said, combat effectiveness, lethality, readiness, impacts recruitment, retention. You would think that is very simple, but when you're doing this work, do not assume that the audience you are trying to appeal to knows why it's important. They probably don't. Why is that? Because who you are trying to appeal to 9 times out of 10 is a white male. And unless they have the benefit of having a sister or were very involved in their own, their wives' experience if they had children, they have never lactated. So for me, that's what it was. They have never lactated, so they don't know what that is like. So you have to start from very, very basics. And then also articulating, how does it actually impact your duties? For me, we have the postpartum waiver where I didn't have to go TDY or TAD for that first year, but I couldn't do my job. So then it was, okay, well, what's going to go on my OPB? Fit rep is a similar term used in another service. If I don't do my job, like, that's not going to be good for Sam. Probably not going to look good to a promotion board. So that's what it was impacting. I could not, if I didn't have the support, I either had to choose to stop somewhat abruptly, which can cause medical issues, or out-of-pocket costs, which some people are beneficial, are in a place that they can afford that. Others are not. Junior enlisted are not in a place that they can afford to spend $1,000 to ship breast milk back home after a 2-week TDY. Is it causing you pain? Somebody pointed out about the rucksack. It's causing you pain. That's the problem. You got to explain that to somebody, and you did it very eloquently, explaining why that's the problem. And who's being impacted? Who's your population? This is where you're going to get into data collection to figure out who is this impacting. I anticipate that this might become, unfortunately, the data from within the department may become a little challenging, because there are reports that from within the department they are scrubbing how we are collecting data, demographic data in particular on people. I don't know what that's going to look like. I just know that it is happening. So that is something that may make it more difficult for us to do this work. But we do collect data on lots of different things. I think the DoD collects more data than it even knows that it collects. But you're going to want to identify the population and articulate why it's important to your organization. I had to articulate to my boss that, hey, my defense clients will not be represented, will not have timely representation throughout court-martial processing if I can't go and represent them. And that looks different to depending on whatever job that you're in. Step 3, who owns the problem? So you have a problem, but who can you go to fix it? If you're at the lower tactical levels, sometimes this can be confusing because you want to go to your commander, right? Whoever your commander is. If you're at the very tactical level, usually your 05, 06 type commander is not going to have the authority to change these bigger problems. They're just not, unfortunately. But maybe they do. There are such things as local policies, but you're going to want to figure out who owns it. Who is the person who can give you that yes and actually get us to a point where we can fix it. Is there a service regulation? Is it a DoD problem? For me and my situation, I ended up finding out that I would have to change. I thought it was just going to be an Air Force thing. I'll just do this for the Air Force. Found out, no, it would have to be the Department of Defense. That was the only way to change it. And the higher up you go, the more bureaucracy you have to deal with, the more people you have to convince, which is why building your network is important. But you're going to want to, who is that one person that can tell you that yes? Identify that. Sometimes it's Congress. There are things that I have worked, things that people in this room have worked. Someone mentioned earlier we need legislation. Sometimes the answer is the Hill has to authorize it. For those in the room that are familiar with legislative affairs, right, how the DoD gets tasked to do things, generally speaking, is through the National Defense Authorization Act. That's an authorization. That is a go do to the department, go execute. But don't forget about the sister bill to that, which is the Appropriations Act. So many times the DoD will be tasked with doing things, but they won't be given money to do it. The appropriation side is probably what you're hearing about a lot right now because we're under continuing resolution, so that's another wrinkle to that puzzle. But just a tidbit there on if it's Congress. And if you are doing this internal to the department in your official department capacity, there are rules and regulations and ways that you have to go about doing that. As a private citizen, you can go talk to your congressional representation about whatever you want, as long as you're not representing the department's thoughts, opinions on things. But internal to the departments, they also have legislative proposal processes as well that you can avail yourself of. That where the DoD actually goes to the Hill and says, hey, tell us to do something. We need you to tell us to do this. Where do you find this out? So these are some screenshots from some various regulations, Army, Air Force. So you see there in the middle one, the OPR, that's what we call it in the Air Force, the Office of Primary Responsibility. That's the person who can tell you yes. That's the person who owns the policy. This list here is a tasking from an Army regulation where it's telling you who owns these specific parts of the policy. Those are the offices you're going to want to target. Those are the people who can tell you the yes. Yes, we will change it. No, we won't. And that's a DoD instruction, same thing. This is written in all of them. Is it, and I get as a lawyer, I'm a little nerdy, so I like doing this type of stuff. Make a lawyer friend. But it is there. You just got to comb through it. You got to find it. Gather the data. So this is where I love my data scientists. And data, for me, is very broad. Anecdotal, qualitative, quantitative, research studies that have been done. We use Dakowitz reports to show that things have been validated. Friends in private industry that have done studies and that are willing to, and I get they have LimFacts, right, that are willing to release stuff to us so I can say, hey, I want to help you with this. Can you share something with me so I can actually show what the data shows? For me, for the TDY, TAD, I had to go, so there's internal data systems. So the Defense Manpower Data Center is the Department of Defense data center for all things and all the services. So and anybody with a CAT card can access it, and you can do a data request. So I went on there and I basically typed in, hey, I want to know how many women over the last 5 years that have a child under the age of I think I said 2, have went TDY during their first year after giving birth. They sent me back a long spreadsheet I had to comb through with all the data, and I was able to nail down on average how many women per year across the DoD went TAD or TDY within the first year postpartum, and for how long, which helped me. And I'll tell a little story on that. Is when I was, because I had a joint problem, I had to work with the other services, and I was linked up on the Navy side because I was trying to line up all my stakeholders. And this gentleman on an email, Federal Civil, no, Candace is wonderful. Before, actually, I think I met you, wrote back and was like, women in the Navy don't go TAD within the first year. I was like, I don't think that's true. But what was I able to do? I was able to take this data that I got from the DoD and say, respectfully, sir, incorrect. In fact, on average, 15% of women go TAD within the first year after birth. I don't think he responded to that email for about 2 weeks. And then I followed up, and then this is now a thing. Yes, yes, you do. That's why having data is so important. People can't argue with data. They can't. The data shows what the data shows, and especially if it's DoD-owned data, right? That's their own data. They can sometimes balk at private industry stuff, but that's why that's so important. And it's there. You just have to dig. You have to find it. They don't make it easy, like most things in the department, unfortunately. The other thing is anecdotal data. Anecdotal data, a lot of people will balk at anecdotal data. They don't want to hear the story, right? They don't want to hear the emotional part of it. However, there are some senior leaders, and this is where it becomes important, knowing your stakeholders are very, very persuaded by anecdotal data. For me, I didn't really think that they cared so much what a captain's experience was, but I was able to find an 06 fighter pilot female who had navigated both command and deployments while lactating. And I was able to use her to tell her story. And she was able to, because I was obviously a support AFSC, she was a operational, combat AFSC in the Air Force. She was able to show it from a different lens. So you can use that anecdotal data to your benefit. Just understand your audience. This is an example. So at least in the Air Force, and I think across the department, you can't do official surveys. You have to get that approved through like the DoD survey office or the Air Force survey office. But social media has its downfalls, but one of the really, really awesome things about social media is that you can collect a lot of data on your own. We call it feedback. We couldn't say survey, so we just call it feedback. I would post questions or polls in Facebook groups that I know have a heavy population that I was wanting to collect their information. Google Docs has a survey mechanism where you can post and say, hey, go on this Google survey. This is an example of a chart that was created based off this. This is for the hair policy change in the Air Force. And we worked that for 5 years before we got ponytails. But this data, we kept being told, oh, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. We don't have any data. Someone mentioned earlier about studies. I feel the same way. Former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, C.Q. Brown, said when he was the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, when the Air Force doesn't want to do something, they tell you they'll study it. This is very true. So if anybody ever says that to you, oh, we'll do a study. Sometimes I have worked efforts where there does need to be a medical study. So a lot of stuff in the female specialized healthcare realm, there is truly a lack of data. On other things, not so much. Step 6, so what does right look like? If you are king or queen for the day, what would this policy look like? You need to think about that. And this is where I get into words matter. We have a lot of really horribly written policies across the department where you read it and you're like, what does that even mean? Like, what? If you were king or queen for the day, what would right look like? Shoot for the moon. Be realistic. Have a data-driven course of action. Have multiple courses of action. I would say 2. I like doing 2. Don't give too many, because then it's just too much churn because nobody knows which one to pick. So have one, have an alternate. Don't give them too many choices. Is my going in, but have that thought out. A matter of fact, and I'll get to this in a minute, have your solution tied to the 5 R's that I mentioned. We literally would have slides in our slide decks that said, this is how it would impact readiness. Chat GPT is a wonderful thing because you can put a bunch of data in it and say, oh, what would this look like in 3 to 5 years? And it'll be like, oh, in 3 to 5 years, this will increase retention by 15%. Or I have done Chat GPT with some Dakowitz reports and been like, hey, this is the problem, this is the data. If we fix this, based on these reports, how many barriers will we have eliminated? And it'll pop out, oh, this eliminates 16 of identified barriers across the service. Senior leaders love to hear that they're getting after problems. So presenting them easy wins. It's not easy for us, the people who are doing the work, but easy wins for them is important. But tie it to the 5 R's: readiness, recruiting, retention. Be creative in how you think about how we measure that. Resourcing. Everybody always wants to know how much money things cost. This was a learning point for me as I did this work. So I've always served at the tactical level, like 06 command level on active duty, and now in the Guard. But when I did the JTR, the Joint Travel Regulation stuff for the breast milk, I think we crunched the numbers. I got someone who was much better at Excel than I am because I'm a lawyer and I don't do public math. And it was going to cost the service like, I don't know, the DOD, like an estimated, if every woman that we thought might lactated and needed to ship milk, it would cost like $1.6 million. At first I was like, oh my God, they're never going to approve this. That's so much money. The first time I said $1.6 million to like a headquarters staff person, they're like, oh, that's chump change. That's nothing. Like, that's cheap. I was blown away. So I offer that because that was a learning point for me that kind of deterred me at first, where I was like, oh, I just don't think I'm going to be able to do this. And they really didn't even like care. They were like, yeah, wow, this is an easy solution. Budget dust. Yes, someone said that. That's a term I learned very quickly. So tie that's what I mean by resourcing. Tie it, how much is it going to cost? Some things don't have a cost. And if that's the case, just say it doesn't have a cost. Say how you arrived at that point. This is something that I did. So I actually went in, this is the JTR, and I told them exactly where they needed to make the change and where they needed to put the language. You'll see that I'm referencing the federal travel regulations here. Like, that's the parent authority. The other thing you're going to look at, what is the legal authority? What allows the department to press forward and go ahead and do this? What has tasked the department with going ahead and doing it? And here, in my situation, the department had the authority. They just weren't exercising it, so it was a matter of getting them to do that. Pro tip that was on the previous slide: red team. Doing this work, a lot of people who are doing this work is because they've been personally impacted by something. Red teaming is super important because I can tell you I've been asked some very atrocious things in meetings with senior leaders. Things that if I had not red teamed or red celled, I think is another term that's used, the problem. If I had been asked that question for the first time in a meeting with a senior leader, I wanted to lose my shit. Like, did you really? I've literally had somebody compare shipping breast milk to shipping meat. Oh, well, we don't pay for you to ship meat when you PCS. Why would we pay for you to ship breast milk? Well, last time I checked, I can't buy breast milk at the grocery store. So, anyways, very personal to me. Many of you have probably experienced things that are very personal to you. So the red teaming is super important because when you get those hard questions that will trigger that emotional reaction, very valid emotional reaction, you're able to step back and answer it, and you have your answer ready to go, and you're ready to get after it, and it's not going to phase you. So red teaming is super important. Also helps you see gaps. Gap. I was briefing a senior leader on a breast milk shipment thing, and I have this gentleman. He got my utmost respect after asking. He stopped the meeting. I mean, he's got his whole staff. He's a 3-star. Got his whole staff on the call. He's like, Sam, what is a breast milk stash, and why does it matter? I was like, good on him for recognizing his blind spot, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't explain that. So sir, it is this. It is this. This is why you need it. This is why it's important for both the mother and the baby, for career progression, all these things. And he's like, why is this still a problem? He's like, we should have fixed this 20 years ago. I was like, yes, sir. Yes, we should have. So red teaming also helps kind of with those gaps, so you can anticipate. That was something I had not anticipated. Step 7, who can be your ally or champion? So I've mentioned a couple times briefing senior leaders, right? Like that 3-star I was briefing, he was not the decision maker, but he was in a position of where he was a stakeholder, and he had access and placement within the Pentagon to get me to who I needed to get to make a decision. So you have to find your allies. Male allyship is super important when doing this work. It just is. Quite frankly, I don't like the reality, but the reality is a male can say something in a room that I can't, and it's just received a different way. I wish it wasn't like that, but again, it's reality. Who are your stakeholders? Thinking about that, who is going to have influence? I had to brief a lot of medical folks because for some reason because they associated it with lactating, they were like, oh, it's a medical thing. Get someone to be your senior champion. The Formal Women Initiatives team in the Air Force, we had senior champions, so we had senior executive service members and general officers who had raised their hand to help us and give us access and placement in the Pentagon to get these things. And when they would blow off an email from a major, when a Tier 3 SES would send it, it usually got a response a whole lot quicker, or when a 3-star would send it. So find out who those people are for you and build the team to help you. This work is hard. It's long. It can be unforgiving. You're not thanked very often. And so your team is who you're going to turn to on those hard days, because I get told no all the time. Way, 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 way more than I've ever been told yes. I get told no. And that's really hard, especially when you have emotional tie to what you're doing, and you've been doing it for so long. Collaboration across the Joint Force. I love the Joint Force. It's how I met Candace. That's how I met a lot of people in this room. If it's a DoD problem, you need that joint collaboration. Even if it's not a DoD problem, they can help you. So there have been instances where I've called my counterparts in the other services and been like, hey, the Air Force is saying that, the Army sat on this and didn't do it. And then I call my Army friend and they're like, we turned in our tasker like 2 weeks ago. Okay. Interesting, because that's not what I'm being told. So this is where your network becomes very, very important, so that you can get after the problem and move them as quickly as possible. Action. Step 8, you're going to start with briefing. It always starts with briefing. The Pentagon loves PowerPoint presentations. They love white papers. You have to talk to them how they want to be talked to, so you will have to generate those products. And then you're going to start your kind of roadshow of getting people on board, briefing your stakeholders, briefing your policy owners till you get to that actual person that can tell you yes. Request it. Make the ask. Don't just present them the problem. Make the ask. At the end of the meeting, make them an ask. I see a lot of people not do that. Make the ask. Tell them, hey, will you support this? Is this something you can get on board? What else do you need? Don't take no from someone who can't give you a yes. There's a respectful way to do that in the military, right? If it's a stakeholder and somebody who can't tell you no or can't tell you yes, don't take a no from them. You can say, respectfully, thank you for your input. Thank you for the red team, but I'm going to continue on, and my next briefing is with so-and-so. I encourage you to reach out to them and provide them your feedback. And you never know who you will brief. Will you be ready? I mean, I've been pulled into briefings with the Secretary of the Air Force, who wanted to hear about particularly the flying while pregnant effort we mentioned earlier. There was a lot of senior leader attention. So be prepared for that. Be polished. Be data-driven, and understand the problem that you're trying to get after. So these are examples. I'm not going to go through all of them. They're examples of things that have been done. This work can be done. You just got to be willing to put in the work. Pro tips: find your why. And I know I'm running out of time. Find your why. This is a foot stomp for me. Your why is what's going to keep you going on the hard days. My why is my kids. So I'm in a dual male family. I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. Number 4 is due in June. And dual male kids are like 5 times more likely to serve than children with one military parent. and way more likely to serve than someone who's not connected to the military. So I know at least one of my children is going to serve. If it is my son or my daughter and they're sitting in the cockpit of an aircraft, you know, I don't want my son to look to his right and think it's odd to see a woman sitting next to him, or think about all the, you know, how she's going to pee in an aircraft. Like, I don't want him thinking. I want him to see her as an equal partner, and just an airman, right? Just another airman, another aviator. For my daughter, I don't want her to have to deal with some of the obstacles that many people in this room have had to face. I want her to have every tool at her disposal to be successful in whatever she chooses to do. So that's my why. I encourage you to find out what that is for many reasons, not just for policy change stuff. I already talked about the don't take a no. Respectful disagreement. You can disagree respectfully. A lot of times in the military, I see this where people aren't willing to say, thank you for your feedback, but I'm going to continue on my advocacy journey. There's a way to do that respectfully, and stay within the bounds of like the military hierarchy. Don't walk past a problem. If you're having a problem, someone else is too. The most rewarding thing is not the long list of things that we've changed and like the lasting impact that many people in this room have made. It's when that one airman, that one E3 sends me an email or calls me or hits me up on Facebook and goes, thank you for doing that, because I was able to stay in the military because of your efforts. That one person. It's usually not just you. It's widespread. So if you feel like you're on an island, you're not. You have a whole network here at this place. If you need somebody to talk to, reach out to me. But don't walk past that problem, no matter how small it is, because it all makes an impact. We're all chipping away at the iceberg, right? We're not going to sink the iceberg. It's just not how it's going to work in a bureaucracy. But we are chipping away at it, and every time we chip away, slowly that iceberg will go away, and it'll start to melt, hopefully. All right, that's all I got. Yeah, we're out of time. Hit me up if anybody has any questions after. You guys can share the slides. But thank you for having me, and thank you for being here. It means a lot to everybody in the room just to be here and listen to this information. So thank you.